there was a list that was out there that you had sent me about all-time 49ers top 10 players. Now, where did this list come from? The one that you sent me has Jerry at 1 and Joe at 2. Where did you find this list?
It was on Facebook. It was circulating around in the first week of May. It was popping pretty heavy, and I was in there banging away because I've got some real thoughts about this list. It's interesting to me that you talk about people and their recollections, and you can kind of, when you hear people making, or at least I could when I was going back and forth with people in the groups, you can really tell when people started following this team based
Yeah.
on who they were champion. And because, like, for example, one of the big ones was, God bless Merton Hanks, top 10 for get out of here. I mean, honestly, Merton Hanks, to me, and I'll go down fighting on this. He's not even Eric Wright. Come on now. I mean, Merton was a good corner.
Yeah.
He served us well, but Eric Wright was a monster.
Yeah.
he was and listen to Ronnie Lott talk about Eric Wright. He was that dude for
Yep.
real. So he wasn't even better than him. And again, I know a lot of people, because I didn't know, like, Jimmy Johnson is on
Yeah.
there. I didn't know about him until the NFL 75. And people didn't throw the ball his way. He just didn't get, he was like one of the first shutdown corners where, nobody, they didn't even, quarterbacks didn't even look that way. So he's another one that 49er DBs talk about with a lot of reverence. So, I didn't see him play, but if Ronnie Lott says he's that dude,
Yeah.
then he's that dude as far as I'm concerned.
So there's a few of them out there, and the funny one is somebody asked Chat GPT to come up with a list.
My goodness.
And look, it's very similar to the one that you sent me from. I think the one that you sent me is from some Instagram account, PFS something or other.
Mm-hmm.
But both lists have the same top 4, though they're jumbled a little bit. Do you have Jerry or do you have Joe number 1?
For me, Jerry, I'm fond of saying, Jerry Rice is the best football player I've ever seen in cleats. So, I mean, he's on any list. And again, it's interesting that comes up, because that was always a debate me and my uncle had.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. Was Jim Brown was his guy.
Speaking
he
of,
said he'd never seen anybody who was, he, from that day till this, was a better football player than Jim Brown. And I can't argue. I never got to see Jim Brown play. So Jerry's my guy. So
me too.
So it's Jerry, and I mean, it's, Joe is my quarter. It's still, even with all that Brady has accomplished, Joe is still my quarterback. Yeah. And I mean, I understand that might be, biased, because 7 is greater than 4, but Joe was 4-0.
Yeah. And he wasn't playing in a passing league, like,
oh yeah, I mean, it was the, his numbers. I just saw there was a video going around this week about his 89 playoff run. But I mean, he was just, it was peak Joe. I mean, he didn't throw any picks. I mean, it was his, like, passer rating was something like 146 or something crazy like that. He was just, he was out of this world. And I mean, that was the great thing about Joe, was that the higher the stakes got, the better he got. So again, for me, that's my guy. But it's interesting that ChatGPT had their top 4 jumble, because mine was too.
Yeah. So 3 and 4, and actually 5 are very similar, and 5 is the one that I have a problem with. But we'll talk about 3 and 4. it's Steve Young and Ronnie Lott, depending on I would put Lott in front of Young
Yes.
personally.
Yes.
Because Young had a fantastic career here, but Lott was really the foundation of helping kick off 81, and he was the best player on the defense when they won the Super Bowl.
I mean, how about, because I have not done this research, but I can't remember in all the years that I've been watching football anybody to be an all pro at all three defensive back positions: corner, strong safety, and free safety, which he did. So he was, literally the best defensive back in the league for a stretch of time. And I mean, he gets, and rightfully so, the highlight reel of Ronnie Lott is going to be hits, but he was a shutdown corner as well, which is, I mean, that's like a skill set that you rarely see. He was that dude. And yeah, for me, he's definitely number 3. No disrespect to Steve Young. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
when you get to talking about the top 5 and top 10, they're going to be some good, very good players who are not on this list. And it's not that, I don't appreciate them, but I mean, when you start talking about, when you start delineating and parsing between the best of the best of the best, yeah, I mean, I just think Ronnie Lott, for me, is that guy.
and he had to reinvent himself 2 different times.
Yeah.
So number 5 is where I have a problem with, and it's I
Big
love
problem.
this guy, but Dwight Clark isn't the 5th best 49er of all time. He is very valuable to the franchise. In 1981, he was an all-pro receiver, but his speed, because of injury, I want to make sure that I believe he had a knee injury, which really slowed him down. I feel like by 87 he was done. And that's not a very long career, but it's the catch, right? It's the catch.
Well, yeah, I mean, he is, a part of the most iconic play in franchise history.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is what it is, because I mean, if you are being real about it, by my count, he's like the 5th best receiver in franchise history. I go Rice, Gene Washington, for me, T.O., John Taylor, and then Dwight. That would be my top 5. So 5 is a little high for Dwight.
Yeah,
For me.
absolutely. I agree with you. I'd have to look at Gene Washington's numbers again to determine where I'd put them, but T.O. is definitely higher on this list than Dwight Clark. And then you get to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and there's a mix of Frank Gore, Patrick Willis, Bryant Young, BY. You mentioned Jimmy Johnson already, and there's Roger Craig, and then there's Terrell Owens. Those are kind of where things get bunched right there. But where would you have Mr. Terrell Owens?
Here's the thing. T.O. is, I don't care what you feel about him. He is on the Mount Rushmore. For me, he's on the Mount Rushmore of NFL receivers. It's Jerry, Moss, T.O., and then you can Fitz or Harrison. You can have whoever you want at 4. T.O. is definitely 3 in my book. And to me, in my opinion, 49er T.O. is the best version of T.O.
Way better
than anybody. So
all you gotta do is look at the stats. You want to know what the craziest thing about this is? The guy who he was most frustrated with, Jeff Garcia, he had better numbers with Jeff Garcia than any other quarterback, including Steve Young, because Steve Young caught him when it was baby T.O. By the time T.O. was T.O., Jeff Garcia was a quarterback. But you look at those numbers with him and Garcia versus him and Romo and him and McNabb, it's very clearly his best years were with Garcia as his QB.
So for me, it gets a little, because for me, he is. I have to acknowledge that so for me it was Rice, Montana, Lot Young. I forget how it
Did,
went.
did
And
you
then
go? Did you go Willis, BY, Gore, Roger? Though I
well
think
it
I think those guys fit in that spot.
yeah, I didn't I ended up I moved Dwight out
Yeah.
of 5. I didn't touch Johnson. I just left him there at 6. So it it was because again, Bam Bam and Frank are like Frank is probably I say Jerry is the greatest, Joe is the greatest quarterback, but I think Gore might be my favorite player. He might be my favorite 49er of all time. I just love that guy. And
Yep.
then the same with Patrick Willis. He was such a great player that again. So he was right there. So for me, I think it was like I put like Gore ended up being replacing Clark, and then it was Johnson, and then it was Willis, then T.O. And then so for the last 2, the last 3, it was like, you could put you could do that, T.O. was right is there.
Yeah.
T.O. was like 7. And then the last, for 8, 9, and 10, for my 8, 9, and 10 were like this is spoiler alert for me. I had Bowman up there.
Okay.
He is to me he's a sneaky Hall of Famer. He's right there. Then you got BY, and then 10 it could be Clark, it could be Craig, it could be 10. There's a lot of guys that if you were to, I'm not gonna die on that hill. If you
Yeah.
tell me it's this guy, okay, it could be that guy. It could be Roger Craig. If you want to tell me it's the Dwight Clark, that's fine. I don't have much. I know Bowman is probably controversial. I just think his career, to me, he's a Hall of Famer. And it's you have to really go back and look at his numbers to see it. But I it seems like Patrick is having a hard time getting in. So Bowman probably won't. But to me, he he's high, very high up there for me.
My if we ask my dad, he would say that Brody has to be on that list because that's the
Okay,
quarterback who he grew up
okay,
with, right?
okay, and
The
that's fair.
the other thing about this is it's very hard to put offensive linemen on a list like this
Hmm.
because it's just hard. You don't have a lot of numbers to back up your information. Like someone like Randy Cross, who was an all-pro during the rise of the 49ers.
And
Like,
see, that's the thing though about that era of play. Because Randy Cross, you got Guy McIntyre, there were people who were stomping for Sapolo, but then it's like I love Jesse, but I don't think you could put him above McIntyre and Cross. And then Staley. What
yeah,
about
Staley.
Staley? And what about
And
Liam
people
St. Clair?
who
What
are
about
older than us would say Bob St. Clair has to be in the top 10.
yeah? So again, I can't when you start you go past like 75. I've done some research, but you go past that, like those Nomalini and
Yeah.
those kind of, I have no context for for those guys. Joe Perry.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah, you
if
look at YA Tittle's passing stats and you're like, "Come on." But it's like a completely different game back
it's
then.
a complete, well, we talk about that, but like the game that Joe played is completely
Yeah.
different than the game we play now. So
Joe's getting body slammed in games.
exactly. And you want to talk about just receivers getting written down the field, and then also he played in an era where going across the middle was really a thing, where in a way that it's not now. It's
So
just
much so that Ricky Waters went across the middle and he was like, why am I gonna take this
for
hit in
who,
this game? For who,
for
for
what.
what?
It's one of the greatest quotes ever. But yeah, I mean that's just something that receivers these days, I was watching a highlight reel of Brian Dawkins, and it was like
Yeah.
every one of those hits
Yeah.
was 15 yards. He had like $500,000 worth of fines in that 2-minute clip. I mean, so it's just a completely different game.
Okay, so Roger Craig, historic, but also someone who always seems to miss the cut, just misses the cut in the Hall of Fame. First running back in history to have 1,000 yards receiving, 1,000 yards on the ground. Wendell Tyler, Wendell Tyler was a really good running back for the Niners. He ages out. Craig comes in. Offense gets better. You add Jerry Rice, and Roger Craig is kind of the forgotten man in that offense because of we're talking Rice and Montana, but he was such a big part of what they did. Like I don't know, I'm sure you could find another running back to catch the ball a little bit or whatever, but he was so perfect a
He
fit
was a
for
cheat
that
code.
offense.
He was a
And
cheat code.
I think current because of Gore and because we all love Frank. I'm with you. Frank is in my top 5 of favorite 49ers ever. But because of Frank, it's almost like Craig is a little bit forgotten, I would say.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things there because I had this argument too, not argument, just discussion. Because it's not like I'm arguing against Roger Craig. Roger Craig was an offensive player of the year. The thousand was a big thing, but the fact of the matter is, he had Jerry Rice and John Taylor on the outside. It's hard to double team a running back, a triple team a running back.
Yeah.
And the way that Bill Walsh used him to scheme him up, it was perfect. A lot of those flares out of the backfield, he was just open. I mean, it was just, and it was easy pitch and catch. And then he was a violent runner, and you can't take that away from him. But
Knocking people out with his knees.
right. But the difference to me between him and Frank is that who was Frank's receivers that they were double? Frank carried this offense.
Brandon Lloyd he's not in that echelon of John Taylor.
No. So it was just different. The responsibilities of Frank Gore were just different than what they were for Roger Craig. And that again, like I say, we're talking about the best of the best. So I'm not saying that to denigrate Roger Craig. For me, it's just I have a much greater appreciation. Not that I don't appreciate what Roger Craig did, but what Frank did and what he gave to this offense was just it was otherworldly. And then when I was coaching, man, that was the guy that, I mean, I showed all the little kids. This is patience. You want to see patience and suddenness and balance and strength. Frank Gore to me was the perfect running back. I mean, I know he wasn't as complete a player as somebody like Roger Craig, but in terms of running the ball, I mean, he was just.
Didn't he tear up both knees in college?
Yes.
My goodness.
In 18 months, 2 ACLs.
Crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. I have this rule, and I would say if a Frank Gore jersey came out, I would break this rule. And what this rule is that I don't generally wear jerseys unless they were players from my childhood. And so, the jersey that I do have is a Jerry Rice jersey. He was from my childhood. There are 2 players I would break that rule for. One of them is if they came out with another Kaepernick 49ers jersey, and then Frank Gore. Those would be the 2 where I would break my own rule for.
That's my rule is similar. I don't wear jerseys for players who are younger than me.
Yeah.
But I broke the rule for the black cap jersey.
Yeah.
And Frank would probably be the one if I was gonna do that. I'll rock a lot jersey all day long.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But so definitely Frank would be my guy. If I was gonna wear one from a guy that's younger than me, it would definitely be Frank.
The only jerseys that I've had of late, I've always had a Rice jersey in some form. I had my parents make me. This was before the websites are all fancy now,
Mhm.
and you can do all this crazy stuff. But I don't even know where they found it. But they had to put together their own Garrison Hurst jersey for me when I
Yes.
was in my early 20s. And
Yes.
then also, I had the 1 year Dion was on the team. I had the Dion jersey from the throwback uniform, the red one. And yeah, those are mostly it. But like I said,
Boy,
if I
those were great times. Oh my gosh.